Now, going back, you mentioned Chris Daly gets involved, and then I told you my Chris Daly story of the writing of Threefold Misery. You know, he initially had told me something to the effect of Vic disappeared for like a few days or a few weeks and then reappeared with the songs on that album. You told me that I have that wrong. What is the deal? And I only asked that because I remember first hearing some songs on a cassette and I knew immediately, like, wow, this next Threefold Misery is going to not be like any 108 that we have heard previously.
Yeah, so I think what Chris was referring to, around that time, like, Roadrunner Records came to 108 and was like, hey, like, would you guys be interested in working together? And we were we were we were on Equal Vision, but it's not like we had any like long term agreements with them. And so we're like, all right, like we'll record some songs. And Vic went away and he came back with three songs. There was a song called Panic, a song called Scandal, and then Killer of the Soul. And we did record those songs as like a demo. Panic, I think, ended up being like a additional song that we put out on a re-release because it just never really, for me, like it never really like hit home. But there were a number of times where Vic would come and like I remember at one point he came with a whole album and I hated all of it. Or I hated a lot of it. But a lot of I think I didn't like the songs collectively how they came out, but there were a lot of riffs that I was like, okay, these riffs are awesome, but I don't like these songs. And so, and that's when Daly had left the band, right? So, like a lot of, again, I think Vic through Threefold Misery wrote the vast majority of the riffs, but then there was Triv and I who would play them with him, and then that's where things would kind of get changed around, moved around, edited, tempos maybe shifted a little bit, but he was the primary guy. Like he wrote almost everything. The first lyrical song that I wrote for 108 was Curse of Instinct. Those first three records, I never wrote a lyric. Like I might have changed some words here and there. We might have worked on things together, but they primarily wrote everything. I was doing Ressurection and writing Ressurection songs for a lot of that. But so I think that's where it kind of came from. Like Vic would go, he would disappear for a while, come back with like 8 songs, 10 songs, but they typically got picked apart quite a bit, rearranged, and a lot of stuff just dropped because it again, like not necessarily that they were like horrible songs, it just didn't hit home for me or Triv or both of us.
When you were doing Threefold Misery, I mean, and this is probably, I mean, it's hard to know this, but did you guys have any sense of, hey, this is kind of like, I don't know if game changer is the word, but like, hey, we're doing something
No,
different
no,
here.
not at all.
Okay.
Nothing. No, and I mean, again, like we were, I mean, without getting too deep, like I was in probably some of the worst stages of like my own depression and mental anguish and problems. And I knew, I think at that time we knew we were going to break up because Vic he just wanted to go live in India and be like a monk, like just study scripture and meditate. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I was just trying to figure out how to get to the next day. Triv, I think, always wanted to continue, but I was like, I'm not doing it without, like, this has to be the unit or it's not a band. And I remember, like, we even, like, we actually started recording Threefold Misery before we did the Bloodlight Coalesce tour. We went into the studio, Brian McTurnan. We ended up we recorded a bunch of the songs, but we really were unhappy with the drummer at the time. And so we ended up stopping and some of those songs ended up getting mixed. We just used them as kind of demos, but like that version of the version of Arctic that's on Antimatter was from that session.
Okay.
And anyway, we went on to tour Bloodlight and Coalesce, and then we went to Europe and toured Europe with like Abhinanda for I think 6 weeks or something like that. And then when we got back, like the drummer disappeared and was good if you were to kick him out anyway. And I remember like talking to we had talked to John who played in Helmet and plays in Battles now because Triv Triv played with him back in the day. We talked about him doing it. We actually had Harley. Harley had done a practice with us.
Can you talk, because you mentioned that to me literally in 1996. What was the deal with that? Because you just mentioned it, and then like we were on the tour, and like I think then something else happened on the tour, and like we never got. What was the deal behind that?
Yeah. So Triv, like he knew Harley really well, or I don't know if really well, but he knew him well enough, and he was like, we got to have Harley. Like we should try Harley out. And I was like, I like the drama with him and John Joseph and all that. Like I'm like I have enough drama in my life. I don't need to do that. But eventually, like Triv, if anything, is like persistent.
Yeah.
Like he would not let go of it. So one day we were just like, all right, we're going to show up to the studio. And Vic wasn't there. I think Vic was in India. He was living in India at that time, but he was going to come back and record the record. And so like Triv and I were trying to figure out the drummer situation. And so he had given the demos that we had recorded for Threefold Misery to Harley. And I remember showing up at a practice studio in the Lower East Side. And I walk in the room and it's Triv playing bass. Harley's playing drums. He's got a shirt off. He looks like Animal from like the Muppet Show. Like his arms are flailing everywhere. He's got like long hair. He is screaming while he's playing. And I got to tell you, it was fucking insane. Like it sounded pretty fucking incredible, but just the sight and energy of it, because Triv is like, he's got a very, and there's no way to describe it, but he's got this incredibly unique, crazy energy to him.
Yes.
And then you add Harley in, and I just remember like they get done with the song, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like this sounds amazing. And he's like, all right, what song next? And I name a song. He's like, all right, hold on. He pulls out of his bag a like Fisher Price like kids recorder. Like, you know, the ones that have like the microphones on it you could sing in?
Yeah.
He pulls one of those out and he finds a song and he wants to listen to it real quick. And at one point he stops it. He's like, yo, you got to tell me, like, why the fuck did you kick this drummer out? And we're like, oh, that's actually not a drummer. That's a drum machine. I remember he looked at Triv and he's like, you motherfucker. Like, why did you, like, I've been trying to figure this out for like 2 weeks. I couldn't figure out how this guy played these songs. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a fucking drum machine. Anyway, he played with us. I was probably there for about an hour and a half, and it sounded phenomenal. And Harley at that time was just like, yeah, like this will be great. Like, let's do this. Let's go on tour. Like, this record's gonna be fucking huge. Like, let's do this. And we were getting ready to, we left. And at one point, you know, Harley, we were walking, and it was my wife at the time, myself, and Harley. And at one point, we're walking towards Avenue A and First Street, Manhattan. And that's an area where a lot of people hung out. But like, you know, when you walk around that area, like I bump into John Joseph all the time. And I just remember at one point, he's like, yeah, like if I see John, he takes his fucking knife out of his pants. And I was like, yeah, like this is too much. Like you know, like